Hello and welcome to today's webinar entitled A New Way to Optimize Temperature Monitoring for the Pharmaceutical Supply Chain, and it's brought to you today by Onset and Pharma Logistics IQ. So I'm your host for today, Shanice Henry, editor for Pharma Logistics IQ. Before we get going today, I'll just quickly remind everyone that this is an interactive platform, so please do feel free to ask questions at any time in the Q&A chat boxes which are on the right hand side of your screen. We'll have a Q&A section at the end of our session today. Okay, so we've got our speaker here with us today. So we have Paul, Product Marketing Engineer from Onset. And before we get going today, so we're going to take a quick poll. So essentially, this poll is going to be looking at the percentage of shipments that require temperature monitoring. So we're going to invite you all to partake in this one. Okay. So our question, as I've just mentioned, so it's what percentage of your shipments require temperature monitoring? So we have 0 to 25%, 25% to 50%, 50% to 75%, 75% to 100%, or unknown. So if you please just select your required answer, and then we will discuss these results shortly. Just give you a couple of minutes to select. We'll just allow our base here to select their answers. So just to cover that again, so what percentage of your shipments require temperature monitoring? So we have 0% to 25%, 25% to 50%, 50 to 75%, 75% to 100, or unknown. Okay, so we're just getting our results in now from that poll. Okay, so we have our results here. Right, so we had 22% of our base said 0 to 25%. We had another 22% also selected 25 to 50%. Only 5% said 50 to 75, and then we've got here 27% said 75% to 100% of the shipments needed temperature monitoring. We've also got 24% there saying unknown. Okay, so I'll hand over to our speaker for today, Paul, who's going to analyse the results and be conducting the session for today. So over to you, Paul.
Thank you, Shanice. I want to thank everybody today for joining us for this conversation to talk about different ways to optimize your supply chain. I think that the poll is an interesting starting point for the discussion. And it's important to point out that really this temperature monitoring portion of the supply chain does vary for customers. Now, I was given a bit of an insight into the attendees list, so I know that we have with us people here from pharmaceutical manufacturing, the clinical logistics world, as well as pure logistics carriers. And I would wager, looking at these numbers, that you'd have people from all groups in all different buckets. We know that some of some of the logistics companies aren't charged with monitoring temperature in the supply chain, but some do have that as an extra added value. We have pharmaceutical products that are, of course, high-value goods that are more in the biologic space that require monitoring, where some OTC products don't, and with the clinical space, it, of course, runs the gamut depending on the drug that they're running through the trial at the time. So it's an interesting point, and I think it shows that we have people, it will drive different drivers within the supply chain and different cost models accordingly. So what I'd like to do now is talk a little bit about, in the industry, this problem we all face. And I'll start by saying that these are numbers that came out of 2015, but I think they're very relevant in today's world. We are seeing across the industry a huge growth and move from a traditional chemical pharmaceutical product to your more biologic shipments. And as we look at the growth rate between the two different segments, we're really seeing about 67% of the growth in new products is in the cold chain space, while only 29% is in non-cold chain. I know those numbers don't perfectly add up, but I think they give an accurate picture of some of the pressures that are being put on the industry. And when we talk about the pressure points in the industry, these new shifts to cold chain products are talking about direct costs in packaging, increased costs in monitoring, as well as costs in active transport and additional qualification and validation activities. In addition, you're also seeing indirect operational costs being burdened on top of that. Not only are you paying for more temperature monitors or more advanced packaging in your supply chain, you have to have more people in your supply chain that are putting those packages together, more people who are working at trying to understand what's the best way to go about things. What are the staff costs along with that? In addition to this, the tighter your range is, the more you have to deal with excursion management. And when we're talking about the clinical world, or we're talking about some of the high-value biologics in the manufacturing commercial world, excursion management can take up a huge time burden and cost burden on organizations. And of course, we also have that big cost of product loss category. What happens when you didn't protect your packaging or your product with the right packaging? What happens when it wasn't handled correctly in the logistics space? What happens if there was damage drop? How do you manage all of those indirect costs? And as we are moving from a more chemical-based product to more of a biologic mix in the global product portfolio for pharmaceutical companies, we're seeing all of these really driving costs within the supply chain. So what is driving these costs and in the clinical and commercial space? Clearly, increased regulations are one of the cost drivers here. We have new GDP regulations in the EU that are about 3 years in effect now. We're seeing upgrades or proposed upgrades to GDP documentation in the US, and you're also seeing the implementation of global GDP regulations around the world, from everywhere to Saudi Arabia, China, South America, and other countries in the world following some of these leaders in suit. We're seeing, of course, that increased biologics pipeline. The products that are coming to market are more sensitive. We have targeted immunotherapies. We have biologic products that really can't go outside of 2 to 8 range. We have products that can't freeze. One freeze thaw cycle might ruin the product forever. So these are driving costs in how we look at and manage our logistics supply chain. Of course, with that, we have increased product value. You know, if you're looking at a shipment of a product that's very inexpensive to create, and if you have an excursion, you have to scrap product, there's less of an impact than if you're shipping a $2 million pallet and you lose that because of an excursion or an issue within the supply chain. And finally, I think this is an important point, but there are competitive cost pressures. The generics and biosimilars market are putting pressure on traditional pharmaceutical and biologic manufacturers. And all of those items are driving direct cost-cutting initiatives within the supply chain, whether that's figuring out ways to get things to ship cheaper, to use different methods or different distribution models. We're seeing people look at new technology, packaging innovation, cheaper, more effective packaging, different types of technologies to log and track information within the supply chain, everything from temperature monitors to shock light monitors, other types of devices that are really trying to help improve the supply chain and cut out some of those drivers for cost. We're also seeing the integration of multiple systems. We have companies who are using ERP systems, business intelligence systems. They're using cold chain monitoring systems. They're using inventory systems to track their packaging, and they're tracking costs in different ways. We're seeing within the pharmaceutical world, within the clinical world, a large drive to integrate those systems so you have that visibility across all of your platforms, and it will help with this last point, making data-driven decisions. Really taking all of the information within your supply chain and saying, how can we look at what we've done, take those drivers, those key performance indicators, and then start to push cost out of our supply chain to counteract competitive cost pressures, to counteract any increase in cost of loss. So we're going to put a second poll up there now, and I'd ask Shanice if she could throw this up there now. I'd like the group to weigh in on what is the highest cost driver that you have related to your cold chain. And we are somewhat limited here in the number of buckets that we could have, but I would hope that you'd be able to provide some insight based on these five categories. So I think the poll is closed at this point, and we're just waiting for the results to come in. So we have the results in, and I think you'll see that the largest driver in the cost is that first one, the packaging and refrigerated transport, followed with 55% of the respondents coming in with that number. Then we have temperature, logging, and quality management as 10% and 10% of the highest cost drivers, with excursion management being 14% and 12% of you saying there's another cost that's really driving. I think this is somewhat of a telling slide, and I think it's ubiquitous across all of the different segments in the pharmaceutical world. I've seen it from my own world in my previous life of consulting. We've seen a lot of companies going and looking at different ways to qualify supply chains, really understand the temperatures that are being driven in the supply chain or that the products are experiencing to try to drive down some of those packaging and refrigerated transport costs. And I would argue that one of the best ways to do that, one of the ways that you can really help to start to drive cost savings within the supply chain, is to fully utilize the second bucket that we have there, which is temperature monitoring or temperature logging. Using actual data from your supply chain to make business decisions based on what type of packaging that you have, the refrigerated transport you're going to use, when and where to use that, as well as driving down costs to your quality management group and cost investigating excursions. So we're going to talk a little bit now about logger technology and why we monitor and how they can influence some of those previous items we spoke about. So when we talk about why in the industry we monitor, there are a number of reasons, and I could have broken this out into more, but the four that really work for me is, of course, the first one is product safety, and as a caveat to that, patient safety. Nobody here wants to be involved in an issue where a drug is either inefficient or something happened to it where it actually caused adverse harm to a customer. So product safety is the first and foremost thing we talk about and why we monitor. Of course, there's a risk management component to that and understanding the risk to your supply chain, both from that product safety, but also the cost standpoint. You have regulatory drivers, which are becoming a more increasing reason why we're monitoring. GDP regulations in Europe are becoming stricter, and they're dictating you have to monitor or you have to understand what's happening within your supply chain if you don't have a qualified lane. And then, of course, the somewhat gray area, cost savings. Logging technology and monitoring your supply chain also gives you the ability to really drive cost savings within the supply chain. Whether you want to look at changing modes, moving from air to road or air to sea container shipments because there's a cost in there. Whether you want to look at reducing those packaging costs, understanding, hey, look, I've been putting a really robust package around these shipments that are going to this area, but when we take a look at the temperatures in that lane, they're really not high enough to justify that. Let's reduce the cost of the packaging there. you can really look at your supply chain from a long-term lane qualification standpoint. So looking at that ways to reduce packaging or reduce how you're protecting your product, but doing that over a long term so you can identify trends, identify where potential issues might be popping up, and then of course proactively going after those and making fixes before you have excursions. And then finally, I think the most straightforward thing that we can look at here is of course product loss reduction. You monitor so you don't lose product. The advantage of a temperature monitor over an indicator in this case is you can look at it and you can make decisions based on the stability data of the product if you have it available. And you can really go and drive down that loss number, which of course affects the industry. So when you're looking at logging solutions, when you're looking at the logging solution you currently have in place, whether you are looking at moving to a new logging solution, you should be asking certain questions about that the system. Do these systems put undue burden on your operational team? Is it easy to use? Is it something that requires a lot of manual steps, or is it something that's automated, quick, really helps drive flow through your process? Does it enable quick excursion investigations? There are a lot of manual steps. If you're not getting data back quickly, does it slow down that process, or is it a type of system and solution that really speeds things up and makes it easier for you as an organization to go through when you do have issues? Is it easy to retrieve data? Do you get every single data file that you ship back to you, or are you constantly spending time and energy chasing people down? I sent a package to you, you dispositioned the product, we never got the data file back. How does your system help automate and make it easier for you as an organization? Does your system allow you to leverage data to improve your supply chain? We monitor these shipments to look at disposition. Did it pass? Did it fail? Was there an issue or not? But can you then take that data afterwards and use it to drive down packaging costs, drive down logistics costs, identify where there are areas where there might be a courier or handler who's not doing as good of a job as you need? And finally, do those integrate or play well with your existing systems? Does your cold chain monitoring solution work with your ERP system? Does it make sense when you're looking at data from one to the other, or is there parity between those systems? Is the system that you're using to monitor temperature easy to integrate into your other systems so you're not logging into 5 different systems at once to try to manage your supply chain? When you're looking at operational burden specifically, you also have to understand the details of that. Does this impact your inventory management system? In that if you're shipping 15 different products, do you have to have a different temperature monitor for each one of those products because they come with a pre-configured temperature profile? Or can you manage those and quickly adjust that on the fly within your supply chain? Can you easily synchronize the logistics information and temperature information? Can you take your origin, your destination, your metadata along with that file and pair it up quickly with the temperature data so you understand not only that there was an excursion, but where it happened, what product it was, and what the impact of that is? How do you manage the loggers are being started? I think everybody on this phone call, if you've worked in the pharmaceutical, clinical, or logistics space long enough, you've had an issue where you've put a temperature logger in a box and it's gotten to the other end and, oh wow, it wasn't started. So we have our customers and people in this space who are actually starting loggers with SOPs, and part of their SOPs is to go over and take a picture of that logger and then go show it to somebody else so they can say it's logging. You have 2 people sign off on that. It's burden in the supply chain. It really takes away from any optimization activities that you're running through. Can you reduce your manual processes, costs, and human error with this? All of these things are really designed to drive down error. Can you automate processes so you don't have mistakes? And finally, as we mentioned before, how do you can your system help document what's going on in your ERP system so there's not manual input steps? With data retrieval, I think I would assume that majority of loggers are used for product disposition decisions. Does your logging system make it easy to do that, whether it's understanding that there's an alarm or not an alarm? How do you go about handling if there is an alarm? Does it give you visibility of data fast and efficiently? Can you see? Can you understand through a click of a button or a quick look what's happening with the logger information? And then can you understand? Can you get that information to key stakeholders if there are an excursion? How many people on the call have had an issue where there was an excursion on a shipment or an alarm and they didn't find out for a day or two because they had to take that logger, you had to bring it to your quality manager at the receiving site, they had to take it, download the logger, upload it into another system, or take a file and put it in an email and send it to somebody. It's been sitting in your inbox over the weekend longer. How can your logging system improve those steps? How can the logging system make it easier to get key information to people when it's needed? And finally, does your system allow you to track download compliance? I spoke with a customer just yesterday that said the biggest issue that they have in their supply chain, they ship 50,000 data loggers a year, and they have a 47% download rate, meaning they get data back from 47% of the loggers, or under 20,000 out of 40 that are being shipped. When you're looking at that, that loss of data is going to significantly hinder your supply chain when you're looking at cost reduction activities and trying to understand what your entire system looks like. When you're dealing with excursions, does your logging system alert key personnel in different areas of an excursion, whether it's a warehouse manager, a clinical site, or within the clinical space, the customers or the vendors themselves? Do they help you reduce time to transmit excursion data? It's not just good anymore that you can find out there was an excursion. How can your system get that information back quickly, be able to review it in terms of the stability data of the product, and then get an answer back on disposition? Help you identify potential issues before a package leaves the warehouse. The way loggers work right now, you start a logger, you put it in a box, and you don't know what's happening until it gets to the end. Can your logger actually help you identify issues before they start? And can it remove time spent in excursions on excursions such as alarm triggers when packages are opened? So how do you start to drive out some of these issues with false alarms within your supply chain, whether a logger wasn't preconditioned well enough, or whether there was an issue with the logger when the package was open, so you have a false alarm? All of these things drive into how logger solutions can help with your data management. Do they help track KPIs, excursions, temperature, lane, products, or do they hurt that, or do they hinder it, or add extra work? Do they automate the process of tagging data to that, so understanding where your origin, destination, product type is in your system? Is that a manual process that takes time, or is it automatic or quicker for your team on the floor? And finally, can you take that data and put it into the systems that work for you? Again, we talked about it earlier. We talked about understanding that there are a lot of systems in play here, whether it's logistics, whether it's inventory, whether it's cold chain and supply or temperature data. How can your systems and tools start to integrate and talk with each other to enhance the value of your already existing systems? When you're looking at all of these items, when you're looking at starting to take those items, looking at a checklist to say, hey, is it worth investing in new technologies from what we have, or do we want to stay with what we have because of the cost limitations? You need to understand those costs of monitoring, the system costs, the loggers themselves, operational costs accordingly, excursion management and analytics and integration. And you need to weigh those costs against the technology investment, the costs of changing your SOPs, your training costs, integration costs, and of course those wonderful buried and hidden costs you see with any implementation of a new system. And this is often driven backwards when you're looking at organizations, because we often look at the short-term gain. Operational teams are driven to say, how much money can you save me this year? How much money can you save me this quarter? If I can cut X dollars of direct cost out, regardless of the indirect cost, how does that change the bottom line for the business? And when looking at data logger investments and trying to improve your entire supply chain, you need to balance that. New technology costs, first off, need to be weighed in both the short and long-term value. And it's hard for people to do that. It's very hard to walk into your boss's office and say, hey, look, I need X amount of dollars to make this new technology investment. It'll take 4 years to pay it back, but it will have all of these benefits. It's a harder sell than walking in and saying, I'm going to move from technology A to technology B because it saves me X dollars a unit. On that note, when you're looking at new technologies, you also have to understand that in this world, as we're looking at new technologies and we have innovation, hardware costs should not be the drivers of the system costs. You shouldn't be looking at technology that costs more. You should be looking at technology that is similar or saves you money, but has increased value, increased efficiencies to the system. At the same time, the system that you're using, whether it's a data repository, an analytics tool, those systems should be upgradable and able to grow and change as your business needs evolve. I don't think anybody on this presentation expects the problems they have today to be the same exact problems they're going to have 3 years from now. And when you're picking a system, when you're looking at new technology, you have to weigh what that path might look like and how can my system and solution adapt to work in the long term. And finally, any changes should leverage widely used technology. You shouldn't be going out and taking an item that is or a technology that's going to be obsolete in a few years. One of the reasons that RFID never took off in the temperature monitoring space is it was so specialized that having RFID readers at different sites was too ineffective to implement. So when you're looking at new technologies, you have to look at technologies that are where the technology market is going, what type of technologies are going to be implemented into the logistics space in the next 1, 2, 5, 10 years, and how the new platforms you're choosing can leverage those. So, in speaking of technologies themselves, let's talk about what's in the market. And we'll talk with what everybody on this call is used to using, USB or cradle-based technology. They represent the majority of temperature loggers used in the market. A USB logger or a logger you need to press on a cradle to download. They're there, they're what we're using, they're comfortable, but I would argue that they put a lot of undue burden on the supply chain. They're a truly reactive technology. You have to have manual steps and manual process to go and get your data, review it, and then get it to the places you need. And even if you have systems that in the back end do help to manage that, if you're shipping high volumes of product, the manual labor costs alone of getting those loggers and downloading them are really intensive and drive cost in the supply chain. You add cumbersome manual steps to integrate your logistics information. The majority of platforms in the market, even from the biggest players, have limited options for data management customization and data management integration. They don't play well with other systems. They're designed to sit alone by themselves off in a corner, requiring you to use your logistics system and your inventory management system, and their system off there. How can you have systems that don't play nice together and still drive operational efficiencies? You also do have new alternative technologies that are coming to market. We see people in the space going to near-field communication, and while that is a newer technology and offers some benefits, the short read range of near-field technology, needing to hold a reader directly up to a device, doesn't allow you to drive efficiencies the way you'd want in the supply chain. You don't take the manual process out of that. Not all mobile devices, tablets, or technology that you're using are near-field enabled, and near-field communications, because of its limitations, long-term might not be the solution. We're already seeing technologies in mobile devices moving away from near-field readers to newer technology. And finally, the investment in near-field. While they are sometimes an inexpensive device, the overall technology investment to implement in the system outweighs the total system gains. You don't have the operational efficiencies that you're looking at. The other end of the spectrum, we're seeing a lot of products come to market for real-time cellular GPRS devices. Now, as an antithesis to the near field, these are very costly options. They're difficult to implement in clinical spaces or parcel shipments just due to the huge volume. They do add increased operational burden. While you do have the added visibility of being able to see temperatures in real time, you have to have people who can actively manage that and go in and manage that information when it's coming in. And so you have a lot of information, sometimes useful, sometimes not, and you have to have an operational staff in place to manage that. And finally, and this is the biggest point, because of the cost of the device, you have to build robust reverse logistics operations. You have to figure out how to send those devices and then get them back to you and reprogram them and remanage them to really try to drive cost in the system. So these alternative technologies, while are taking a step away from the USB technology and starting to help the supply chain, they're not necessarily the ideal solution to really drive value within your supply chain. So, in saying that, we get to the crux of the presentation. What is that technology? And what we're going to talk about now is the power of Bluetooth technology, a technology that the majority of you use in your personal phones, pairing Bluetooth to speakers, using Bluetooth with your mobile devices, your phones. Bluetooth technology and data loggers offer some very distinct advantages and when you're looking at the supply chain. They're low-energy devices. The devices themselves can last as long as a traditional USB device, use the same battery power, and at the same time offer enhanced read range. You can get data farther away from where you are. You can look inside packages. You can single source loggers, meaning you can get one logger and program it at time of use rather than having to get a different logger with a different temperature profile for each of your products that you're sending. And it's a widely distributed platform. We're already seeing within operational spaces moving to mobile platforms to help drive operational efficiencies. You're seeing people on the operational floor using operational tools on tablets to track time, track operational efficiencies in warehousing. Why wouldn't this technology move to the logger space? And on top of that, you have the ability to see advertising alerts. You can see when there are issues ahead of time. You can see internal package temperatures. So if you're in a logistics space and you have a delay of a product or a shipment delivery, you can see what's happening inside that box and take appropriate actions. You can bulk download or bulk configure loggers so you can actively and quickly get the information where you need it to go. And of course, if you're using the right logger, you can turn any logger into a real-time stationary monitoring system, meaning that you can monitor refrigerator temperatures, you can monitor warehouse temperatures at the same cost you would with a regular data logger without the added overhead of building in these massive building management systems. From that, the advantages of BLE are very easy to quantify. You have the ability specifically to increase your ability to do quality checks. We spoke earlier in the presentation about the issue of having to go and have somebody else check to make sure you've started a temperature monitor. What if you could have a quality person walk by a stack of packed boxes and check to make sure that every single logger was started in there without having to open it up? You could enable your specialty couriers, or you could enable your logistics space to react to delays or issues with real data, not making an assumption based on the qualification of your packaging. And of course, the biggest added to this, when you're using a mobile device, when you're downloading information or reviewing your information at the time of receipt, these mobile devices can automatically upload data to cloud solutions, making it very quickly to get information into your system and quickly, if the system is set up correctly, distribute information to those who need it. And I think that's one of the key tenets here. It's getting information quickly and efficiently to those who actually need it. At the same time, BLE has a strong existing platform for use. It's available on mobile devices, it's available on tablets, and it's a technology that's not going away. Mobile devices are available in all parts of the world, so whether you're looking at a fully commercial supply chain, you're working at a clinical supply chain where you have application sites around the world, or whether you're working with a global logistics company, mobile devices are already being integrated into these processes, so you already have this technology available. And because of that, and because people are so used to using mobile devices, and it's easy to build very quick straightforward mobile devices, you reduce your training costs and your setup time with these things. So it's not like you're trying to train people to use a specialized reader. It's using a device that most people are familiar with, they understand how to use, and it cuts down some of that cost of change for the system. So, in saying that, I would be remiss if I didn't move into what Onset brings to the table to try to address this. Given all of the issues that we've talked about, we saw value in creating what we're calling the InTemp cold chain monitoring solution, which for us encompasses our CX500 line of in-transit temperature loggers, our 400 line of loggers which are designed to monitor warehouses, refrigerators, and facilities, the mobile application that can enable that technology and how you manage your loggers, and of course our InTemp Connect cloud solution, which really enables you to, one, store your data in a secure, efficient way, but integrate into other systems. Our system was designed to really talk about the pharmaceutical manufacturing world, but of course all of its offshoots, including clinical trials, logistics management, the logistics and storage arm of both of those, all the way down to your true last mile, so your clinical and hospital monitoring sites, and of course vaccine management programs such as the Vaccines for Children's program in the US and some of the WHO programs around the world. Talking very briefly about these loggers to give you an idea of what they are, we offer both single and multiple use temperature loggers that are Bluetooth enabled and that they are completely managed with your mobile devices. We offer a 15-day, 90-day, or 1-year multiple use loggers. All loggers come 3-point NIST calibrated to come in line with global GDP regulations. They have LED alarm indicators, so you of course can still make product disposition decisions without any mobile device. You can see if there was an alarm or if it was good to go. And they're small, they're low profile, they're 25 grams in weight. So when you're talking about these devices, if you're looking at small parcel shipments, they don't take up room in your packaging. They're easy to fit in and slide in between boxes, and they're easier for you to integrate with your supply chain rather than some of the bulkier loggers you have in the market. In contrast, our CX400 series loggers are a little bit bigger. They have a little bit longer life in that they're battery replaceable and can be recalibrated yearly, so they're good from anywhere to 1 to 6 years, depending on how you're using it and whether you hit it with a forklift. They have a larger display. You have the ability to visually understand what the temperatures are, the min and max of the day. They have audible alarms on them. They allow you to both manage it through the app and, of course, on the display themselves. And they're wireless. They work with wireless data collection in that they can take data and then transmit it back to a central location, whether that's a gateway device that you're using to manage your supply chain, or you manage your facility, or get information back to the tablet in your warehouse manager's office. So if there is an issue, you can intervene. And of course, like our 500 series, they all come NIST calibrated, so they are compliant with global GDP standards. The InTemp mobile app is where you start to take your simple hardware technologies and your Bluetooth devices and really start to drive value with those, making it easy to configure loggers, connect and download, automatically synchronize information to the cloud, create PDF and XLS reports so you can understand what's happening within your supply chain, and do all of this as part of a validated 21 CFR Part 11 compliance system. So obviously when you're looking at implementing new technologies, you have to make sure that it works within the regulations in the supply chain, and these clearly do. The InTemp mobile app allows you to view all the loggers that you have within range in your facility, so you understand which loggers are there. You can see the loggers that are in alarm state up front. You can see their status, the temperature, and whether they're in range or not. You can easily configure your loggers from the phone very quickly. Add in pertinent information when you're launching them. So for instance, we talked about adding pertinent information when you're setting up a logger, destination region, packaging type, notes, service carriers, order numbers. All of that information can easily be collated with a monitor at time of launch. And then of course easy to download and report. So the nice thing about these is when you have the receiving sites, you can connect, download the loggers very quickly, often in 10 or 15 seconds, automatically generate reports on your phone, so it's an XLS or PDF. And the big key driver here is, unlike other systems where you have to go and take that logger, look at whether there's an alarm or not, look at the LCD, and then go plug it in, download the information, and upload it into an account. Using connected mobile devices automatically push that data to your cloud repository, reducing steps in your supply chain and improving the number of data files you get back in your supply chain. One of the things that we push with this app is that you really should have 100% compliance of download and 100% compliance of upload of that data into the system. So you really get a holistic view of your supply chain without gaps or loss because of non-compliance. Coupled with that, an app is not good unless you have a command and control center that allows you to manage that. And that, for us, that's the InTemp Connect Cloud database. We offer this as a free solution to our customers. It's a secure cloud database that allows you to manage users, both cloud and mobile users from your central station, set up customizable alert notifications so when you do have downloads and issues, the information gets to the people you need it to get to. You have advanced search and analytics and reporting. And of course, all of this is designed in that validated CFR Part 11 system. So very quickly, one of the key tenets that we have within this system is, as you saw earlier with the InTemp app, you can pick your profile configuration for your product. All of that is managed within the InTemp cloud. You can set up your configurations. You can add you can add the logging interval, the alarm limits, whether they're cumulative or consecutive before they alarm. You can set up different start options. You can manage all of these temperature profiles in the cloud as an admin and then push them to your team on the floor who are setting things up, making it easier for them to do their job. And with that, you can manage who has different access points. As an administrator, you'd have the ability to run the entire system. But you could, for instance, set up a shipper who's only able to configure loggers, connect to loggers in the account, and then update firmware. You could also set up a supply chain manager who just needs access to the reporting system and doesn't need access into the other parts of the system. It really gives you an easy, customizable view to manage who is in your system and having the right people in the system have the right access. At the same time, you can manage your supply chain data. So whether this is information that you're putting in at time of launch, your order number, destination, packaging type, origin, clinical protocols. You can set all of this up in the cloud and you can indicate whether you want those fields to be required at launch or whether there's something that can be added or not. Additionally, our system was designed from a back end where rather than putting this in at time of launch, it's very easy to integrate this part of our system into ERP systems to push or pull data appropriately so you can get the appropriate data from the systems you're already using to manage your logistics space into your cold chain system. Of course, none of this is useful unless you can search that information. You can see the information you have in your system, you can download it, and you can create reports that allow you to drive efficiencies from your system as well. And when you're looking at all of these, when you're looking at implementing systems like ours or others that add some of these values, you have to understand the costs in that system. Weigh your costs of time, human error, compiling information, other indirect supply chain loss, and the cost of technology lag. If you have to implement these systems later on, what do you lose by not doing it now? And of course, when you're looking for a long-term partner, you should look at partners that have different features and value sets. One of the things that we like to push is that the system that we present and the systems that you should be looking at should be powerful cold chain management systems. They shouldn't have deficiencies, but they should also be dual designed and designed for integration. So as you do move throughout your supply chain and you have a need to integrate other systems, it can be done easily instead of taking a system that was designed to be standalone and then really fighting and adding additional costs to try to integrate it. Of course, all of these systems need to be secured. They need to be able to be you need to have active interfaces developed that are encrypted and secure, and you need to pick a partner that has experience doing that. So, in conclusion, The reason that we're talking about a new way to monitor, the different things that we're talking about in Bluetooth technology really make things easy to use. They're a lower cost technology in that our Bluetooth logger should be at or lower than the cost of most USB loggers in the market. You need to be looking at systems that are powerful tools for analytics, repository and reporting, and systems that are good for both clinical and consumer sites, because you have different parts of your organization that have different functions. It's silly not to use one system that you can really drive value in both. So, lastly, before we get to the questions part of this conversation, a little bit about Onset. We've been a global leader in the fields we've been in since 1981. We're an ISO 9001 lean manufacturing organization, and unlike other vendors or providers, we do all of our manufacturing in the United States. We have a strong, robust international distribution model, but by doing things in-house, we really can drive value, and we can really drive good quality products out the door because we have an extensive engineering department in-house that does our development and works with our customer base to drive innovation. We're leaders in the environmental field, building performance, and now with this system we're of course moving into the cold chain part of the development. So what I would like to do at this time is turn the presentation back over to Shanice. I believe we have some questions and comments coming through, and I'd like to open up the floor to any questions or comments that we have within the group.
Brilliant, thanks very much, Paul, for that. So yes, as Paul just indicated, we're now at the Q&A section of today's session. So please do continue to put your questions and comments in the chat box on the right-hand side of your screen. We've had a few come in so far, so that's good to see. So we'll get started with our first question. So Paul, we've got the question here: is your system fully validated?
It's a great question, and thank the person who asked it. Of course it is. We have an in-house software development team here that fully builds the system inside, fully regresses it, and goes through a full validation process with everything. And if there are any questions or issues with any of these things, we of course welcome our customers to come in and audit our facilities and our processes.
Okay, great. All right, the next question here. So we've been asked, so how long does it take to actually set up the system? Can I do it myself?
Absolutely, and that's a fantastic question, and whoever asked it, I'm thankful that they did. Our system itself is actually, you can completely set up and manage by yourself. It's designed to be user-friendly, easy to set up, and if you understand what information you need, it can be set up in less than a half of a day. We of course have staff in-house that are available to help manage or help implement those systems across a larger supply chain, but it's really designed to be used and managed by our customer base.
Okay, so the next question we had come in is in regards to the price of the Bluetooth logger. So what is the price of the Bluetooth loggers?
Our Bluetooth loggers are on par with any of the major USB loggers you have out in the market. We don't have a published price for our 500 series transport logger, and we encourage our customers to come and talk to it because it is very volume specific. Our CX400 loggers, on the other hand, are available for purchase on our website, and they range anywhere from $119 to $159, but I would just note to people that those are for longer use loggers, things that can be used up to 6 years, recalibrated, so that's why there's a little more cost in those systems.
Great. So we've had a related question here. So how much does the mobile app cost? Are there any other system costs other than the loggers themselves?
So that's another great question. The mobile applications are free for both iOS and Android. The system and the data repository are free for our customers to use and set up. Where you do have additional costs is if we do have customers who are engaging us to do customized reporting, so very specific things for their supply chain. There are some fees there. And when we do get into doing on-set managed development or integration, where we have our engineers spending time integrating into your system, there are costs there. But I like to stress here that this system and the value on our back end and our mobile application, the entire system is a powerful tool using our free technology out there.
Okay, so we've had another question in from the floor asking about performance qualification in regards to closed iOS system versus Android OS.
So we have that's part of our validation system. We do both iOS and Android validation testing before we go to market with those, and all of that is done as part of our ISO 9001 quality system. So it's fully documented and fully auditable.
Okay, great. Everybody keep on submitting your questions. It's good to see them rolling in, but yes, if you can keep submitting while we're discussing, that would be great. Okay, so our next point's in. So how can I ensure that other people with the mobile application cannot access my logger?
That's another great question. So the way our system works, and looking specifically at the InTemp Connect system, is that the system, when you create an account, when you create users, manages the users in the mobile application. When you set up and launch a logger, that logger is automatically encrypted with a passkey that is specific to your account. So if you have, for instance, 6 loggers sitting in front of you from 6 different accounts, you would only be able to access the logger in front of you that was specific to your account. It would be locked. So there's a back-end encryption there that, again, is fully validated, but ensures that you can't tamper with these loggers.
Okay, great. Okay, so how many users can I enable in the system, and what are the costs involved with this?
There are no costs to enable multiple users. It's as many as you'd like, and our system can withstand hundreds, if not thousands, of users.
Okay, so we've got a couple more questions here. So one person said that Bluetooth is battery consuming. What is the typical lifetime?
So all of our loggers in the CX500 world, which are transport loggers, have a shelf life of 1 year or better. They're all validated for 1 year, so that's what we typically use. And they will record for the specific numbers of days that we have. So we have a 15-day recording monitor, a 90-day recording monitor, and then a logger that can be used multiple times throughout a year. So all of them have a shelf life for a year, and a recording period is stated on the logger.
Okay, so another question here. So how do your customers typically connect their third-party systems like ERP to your platform?
So we have if we have customers who are working to integrate in these systems, and we do have a number who are currently doing that with us. We have 2 different ways that we approach it. One, we can give their development team some information to our back-end API that's secure and encrypted, and they can work on the integration from their end. Or you can employ our team where we actively go in, liaise with our customers in a consulting format, and actively identify the best way to take information and either push and pull it into the system as needed.
All right, so somebody else has asked here, so how many data points can be monitored?
So depending on device, it varies. With our 15-day transit logger, we have 8,800 data points. In our 90-day data logger, we have 14,000 data points. The same would be true of the multiple use logger. For our CX400 series, which are our storage loggers, you have for our single channel loggers, so just the ambient loggers, it's 84,000 data points. And for our dual channel loggers, it's half of that. So it's 42,000 per channel, one for the probe, one for the ambient body.
Okay, so someone's made a point here that Bluetooth doesn't always allow for successful pairing. What do you do then when this information is critical?
So I will say this: we have done extensive internal testing, and we're using Bluetooth 4.0 or Bluetooth Low Energy technology. So it's not like your original Bluetooth where you pair like you would to a Bluetooth speaker. Our connectivity rate for iOS devices on the first connection is 99%, and it's 100% on the second connection. So even if there were, in some instances, a drop, like the logger went out of range, we have great connectivity. We've not run into an issue where we can't get information off the logger, and in the off case there were damage or were issues, we at Onset could take the logger back and manually retrieve the data using some proprietary technology.
Great. Someone else has put here, can other parameters also be logged?
Right now we have the loggers that we have in the system are temperature only, but at Onset we have extensive knowledge in humidity, light, G-force or shock and vibration, and given the feedback from our customer base, we'll be expanding our line in the coming years to meet their needs.
Okay, so somebody's asked, are there any issues in regards to reading devices at sites, for example, signal?
We haven't seen any so far. Again, we do pretty extensive testing in our own warehouse with this, and we have a number of customers who are using this out in the field. We have a number of customers who are using these in large warehousing environments, and we stay at about 100-foot line of sight read range, and even in these large warehouses with racking, we get at least that. So we don't have that issue with the loggers out in the field.
So someone here wants to know, how are the loggers disposed of at the end of their life?
So there are a couple different ways you can handle that. Of course, with single-use loggers, as you're sending them throughout the world, you can dispose of them at the individual site. But we at Onset are a company that strives toward doing good things for the environment. So we will, of course, take back any logger that's sold and dispose of it in an environmentally friendly way.
Okay, great. I think we've got time for a couple more questions. Yes, so someone else has just mentioned in regards to any sort of return service for the one-use loggers. Anything else to add on that regard?
No, we don't. We do ask that our customers return them. We don't have a system where we, for instance, have them returned to us. But if they're for larger accounts or for customers who are doing a lot of these, we're always willing to work with you to help make your user experience better. And I would encourage whoever asked that question to reach out to me directly.
Brilliant. Okay, great. So what types of mobile devices can be used with the system?
So we use iOS and we Android devices for our apps. There are some devices that do work better than others. And again, I would encourage you to reach out to us to talk about what devices you have in your supply chain and how we can work well with those. We have an internal list of devices that we test, and some have better read ranges, some have better connectivity rates than others, and we work with our customers one-on-one to identify the best platform for their technology.
Okay, great. So we've got another question coming here. So no concerns around hardware, somebody's mentioned.
I think what I'd ask that person to do is maybe clarify that question a little bit, because I'm not quite sure what they mean about no concerns on the hardware.
Okay, great. All right, we've got time for a couple more questions, so if you keep sending those in. And yes, in regards to the hardware question, if more clarification could be added, then we can get around to that one possibly. So somebody's mentioned here that they're doing a master's project in regards to cold chain in the biotech industry. They've noted here, do you think headspace inside the shippers has an effect on temperature maintenance?
So the way I'm listening to hear that question is does extra room within a insulated shipper have an effect on maintaining temperature? And I would say that it really depends on the shipper, the type of technology you're using, whether you're using, for instance, a dry ice shipper or you're using a frozen gel shipper, the type of product as well as how it's being preconditioned. I've not seen any studies or had any experience where having an extra few cubic inches of space negatively impacts a shipper, but I can't definitively say either way.
Okay, great. All right, well, I think that's pretty much all we've got time for. We're coming up to the hour now. So that concludes the Q&A section of today's webinar. Just as a reminder, today's session will be accessible on demand. So if you do have any further questions for Paul or for the Onset team, you can submit them in the comment box just below where the webinar will be hosted. So then we can make sure that we get an answer back to you in regards to those questions that you might have. Okay, so I'll just pass over to you, Paul. Do you have any sort of final remarks before we close today?
No, I just want to thank the group for attending. I really do appreciate the feedback at the end. It seems like everybody was very engaged. And as you mentioned, if there are any other questions, please feel free to reach out to us at the Onset team. We're more than happy to speak with you about the cold chain. Thank you and have a nice day.
Brilliant. Yes, I'll just second that. So yes, thanks all for attending. Thank you to Paul and the Onset team. And that concludes today's webinar.